Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. If we could have some quiet in the room, thank you. Welcome everyone to this council meeting, Tuesday the 24th of September, where we will be hearing from people who would like to talk to us about the representation review. I'll call on Councillor Hanford to do the council blessing.
Morena, ia mātou e whiriwhiri ana i ngā take kei mua i o mātou aro, e pono ana mātou kakaha tonu ki te whakapau mahara huapai mō ngā hāpore e mahi nei mātou. Me kaha hoki mātou katoa, kia whaihua, kia tōtika tā mātou mahi, a mā te maia te tiro whakamua me te hihiri, ka taia te arahi I roto I te kotahitanga me te aroha.
Kia ora. So I'd like to welcome elected members who are here today, councillors, and we've got some community board members here too. Just welcome to staff, our Chief Executive, Darren Edwards. We've got a few people, we've got Councillor Halliday is online today, still not able to come in. We've got Richard Mansell online too. And we've got some of our submitters coming in online, including our first submitter. We have apologies from...
Sorry, Rob Coford. I think that Dale should be online as well.
Great. We've got an apology from Rob Coford. Do I have any further apologies? I'll ask somebody to move that apology. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Warwick. All in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Do we have any declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda? Leaves of absence can be forwarded to the Mayor's office. Haven't been advised of any matters of an urgent nature, so we move straight on to our hearing for representation review submitters. And we have our first submitter online, Pat Doonan. I believe it's a bit late where you are, Pat. He's just coming in now. He's online. Where? I don't know where he is. Is he coming?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, good morning, Pat. I believe it's quite late where you are, so.
I'm in Athens, in Greece.
Oh, wow. So we've just been circulated a written submission, so the floor is yours.
Thank you. First, I'd like to quickly, can you hear me now?
Yeah, good morning, Pat. It's quite late where you are, so.
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, wow. So we've just been circulated a written submission, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. First, I'd like to quickly...
So, Pat, I don't know how to communicate because...
No, I need... Sorry, I've got to turn off...
Oh, you live streaming as well? Okay.
Yes,
so if you could turn that off, that'd be great because we're hearing ourselves.
I think I've off now. Is that okay?
Brilliant. Yeah, and we can hear you fine here. So,
good.
Yeah, you have 5 to 10 minutes.
Right. Thank you very much. I'd first like to thank you, you and councillors, but also the staff for making this slot available, which I value for obvious reasons, being after midnight here. I have circulated a document which I've drawn up rather hurriedly as a memorandum regarding what I'm about to say. Apologies for the typos. It's based upon having received or being able to see the submissions just yesterday, your time, and actually today, mine. I've, in the short time available, had a look at the first 50 such submissions and also some of the ones at the end of the 431 odd that have been posted. I imagine that it's been quite a task for the staff. I am afraid that I draw from a quick review of the submissions that the survey has deficiencies which make it not really a good basis for the decision that you will need to make on the final representation review. There are several reasons for this unfortunate comment and unfortunate situation. The perhaps key one from my perspective in regard to the Otaki-Waikanae ward boundary, I'm afraid to say, is that the commentary that appears immediately before the survey and is probably the last thing read by those who are going to respond or have responded, reads that these proposed boundary changes are in line with community feedback following the Local Government Commission's decisions during our last representation review process and feedback received from members of these communities since the last election in 2022. I have to say that as a result of an official information request, the council staff have told me that there is in fact only one written comment on this matter of the Te Horo boundary. And that is, in fact, a submission made in the preliminary consultations where the submitter simply says Te Horo should be in Otaki. Now, I do appreciate that councillors feel they personally have an understanding of the Te Horo residents, but I note that councillors who have association there have a view, but also that Michael Moore, who is the community board member who comes from Te Horo, and some of the submitters have a different assessment of the residents' views. The unfortunate fact is that a lot of the non-Te Horo responders to the survey will have interpreted those words of the council as indicating that the council had a robust understanding of the wishes of the Te Horo residents, when in fact the council does not. You have individual councillors have sets of anecdotes, but in terms of anything systematic and detailed regarding the views of the Te Horo residents, at the time the survey was begun, there was no robust knowledge. And yet people making the survey from other areas will have tended to write yes because they thought that the council was telling them that it had a robust basis for saying that this boundary change was wanted. Okay, so that's a problem. The second matter is that as noted by submitters 12 and 13, as it happens, that they both say that it seems inappropriate, I'm paraphrasing, well, the submitter 12 says views should only be, or rather the question about the boundary change should only be answered by Otaki and Waikanae ratepayers and presumably residents. And submitter 13 says that there should have been a not applicable box to tick. As it was, there was only yes and no, and effectively people were sort of likely to feel that they had to tick one or other of those, and for the reasons I explained earlier, they will have tended to tick the yes on a misunderstanding of what the position regarding the council's knowledge was. So I do urge that you, as a council, consider saying to staff that they should make a pretty sharp distinction between answers from residents of Otaki and Waikanae wards as compared to residents of Paraparaumu and Paikokariki, who on the other hand do have a knowledge and interest of the other boundary change. So I make that as a submission that the appropriate course of action would be to heavily discount relatively the views of residents who are not in wards that have the boundary change. Ideally, the question would have said, asked the answer regarding the Otaki and Waikanae ward from Otaki and Waikanae ward residents, and vice versa for Paikok and Paraparaumu and Raumati ward residents. That leads me to the issue of whether we will ever know what are the views of Te Horo residents, given that most submitters have asked that their names be concealed. There is a question about whether the council will be able, staff will be able to advise the public, or even perhaps yourselves, to separate out the submissions that actually come from Te Horo residents. Perhaps a staff member could indicate whether the confidentiality extends to not revealing where a submitter's location is. They do reveal the wards. Mayor Holloway, I will stop at this point with just one additional comment, which is to say that I think that there are other aspects of the survey that unfortunately are not very satisfactory. In particular, the question that asked whether people agreed with the structure and described it, including the Maori ward. This way this was put posed a dilemma, which also resulted in people making commentaries about the Maori ward that really had no place in the survey, because the survey is not about the Maori ward matter. It would have been much better if it had been stated at the beginning of the survey, the Maori ward's decision having been made by the council will be addressed by a referendum as in compliance with legislation. Therefore, in your comments, you should set aside that matter and focus only on matters that are unrelated directly to the Maori ward. If that had been done, then the second question, which effectively asks people to say whether they agree or not with the Maori ward, would have been avoided. Whereas as it is, it was there. And people like myself, I feel that it's my right to not have to reveal a view on the Maori ward, because there's going to be a secret referendum on it. Whereas, you know, I ticked the box to say yes because I agree with the general structure, but, you know, on the face of it, I'm agreeing to the Maori ward too, and having to state a position. I'll stop at this point, councillors and the Mayor, but I think you will understand why I say that this survey is not, unfortunately, fit for the purpose that it is intended to fulfill.
Thanks for your thoughts, Pat, and for your ongoing correspondence on this issue. And certainly we value your input into this process. I've got some questions now, if you don't mind sticking around for a little bit. I've got Bernie.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Pat. Bernard Randall here.
Yes.
My two questions are, is there a danger that if these representation proposals go ahead, that the Local Government Commission could change their mind again and only give Waikanae one councillor instead of two?
My understanding on the numbers is that there's no danger of that occurring at this time, but I do think that I don't see it quite that way. What I do see as the issue is that putting more underrepresentation, rather increasing the Otaki population, the Otaki ward size, is creating an underrepresentation situation that will cause problems down the track. And as I indicated in earlier submissions, for this review, which unfortunately has to be regarded as an interim because of the referendum on the Maori ward, which is, if it fails, if in fact there is not enough support for the Maori ward, and I'm not predicating that in the least, I'm just saying if, then there will have to be a further representation review, and it would be much better if the way that this was handled had been just to leave everything as it was and then have a representation review in the normal after 2 elections. Okay,
thank you. So my second question relates to your submissions, which were, in my opinion, excellent. You say there, we submit that the KCDC would be wasting its ratepayers' money and the Local Governments Commission time by relitigating the LGC's 2022 decision. Would you like to comment or expand on that statement, please?
Yes, well, I mean, there are 2 aspects to it. There's the mechanical one, that by opting to change the boundaries, the effect has been that the fair representation criteria are violated, and so there'll have to be a commission hearing. Whereas if everything had been just left the boundaries wise as it was, there would not have been any automatic need for such a local government commission review. And I do feel, I can't speak for them, but I do think that they are likely to be irritated by that. But more importantly, the council is going and relitigating their 2022 decision. And it should do it with a strong, to the extent that it's going to do it, it should be done with a proper base of evidence. And as I've just explained, the survey fails on that test. It is not a proper basis of evidence. And so I expect that the council will find itself being criticised by the LGC, because both it's made an unnecessary commission hearing process, and secondly, that the commission, the council won't have assembled an adequate body of evidence to justify relitigating. So I think you are in an invidious position if you proceed to relitigate and take it and have it go to the commission.
Thanks, Bernie. Michael Moore.
Thank you. Thank you, Pat. It's Michael Moore here. Look, you know my views on this, and I hear what you are telling the council today, that we need a mandate for moving this, and the way this decision came about 3.5 years ago. So I guess one of the objectives that you're enunciating through this, that if there is any boundary change between the Otaki and Waikanae wards, that it should include the entirety of Te Horo in one of those wards, and currently that's not the case, and that's why we've got to this conversation, I guess. So would you still, even though you are advocating in some case here for a status quo, as in leave it as it is, but would you see some benefit if the boundary did move? And of course, my view is it should move north, if anywhere, up to the Otaki River. But I'd like your view on that, because there's been a number of submitters come in from Waikanae that are talking about still retaining the Te Horo area as a whole in the Waikanae ward.
Yes, okay. I'll keep it brief. In the first place, my advocacy is because there is no sound information base, the best course of action, while I realise it's frustrating, is to just leave things as they are until after the referendum. As soon as the referendum is over, you know where you stand, and you could initiate, it would be appropriate to initiate a representation review immediately at that point. Secondly, though, in regard to the split issue, as my research, I do think I made a contribution here, has indicated that the core problem is the way that the stats devise their mesh blocks. And actually, I think it's a bigger problem than just this particular instance. I'm hoping to get Len Cook, the previous government statistician who has some mana in the matter, to look at this matter and perhaps persuade Stats and the government that it is an unsatisfactory approach, which really goes back to the days of census forms being collected by people walking the streets, and it was better to have them all walk down one side of the street rather than having to crisscross. I think that KCDC should, as I say, wait until after the referendum, but for a decision on a change. But what you should do in the interim is to make the case to Statistics New Zealand to change the mesh blocks and to change them wherever it is the case that it's about maybe involved in a boundary and they run down a street. And so the first step would be to say to Stats New Zealand, this has caused a problem and you wish to have a change in the mesh block and talk that through and get it done.
Great, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks for that, Pat. I find myself agreeing with pretty much everything you've said. The question would be, if the referendum was successful or failed, depending on what your point of view is, so if the referendum confirms a Maori ward, do you think that would then that there would still be a representation review required, or would only be presumably that would only be required in a timely manner if the referendum failed?
Well, actually, the timetable for representation reviews, particularly if you had just regarded the current one as an interim, would suggest that you would have a review immediately after the referendum. I mean, if you follow what I'm suggesting, you would have leave the boundaries now and then have a review straight after the referendum with some certainty as to the structure in regard to the Maori ward, that it would be in place for at least 2 more elections, and you could, with that stability and structure, then have a proper representation referendum, assembling the information regarding Te Horo residents' views, who are the key people involved, in proper, robust fashion. And you can trigger a representation review next year, immediately after the election, or probably in 26, on your own decision. So that would be the course of action that I suggest that the council should follow.
Yep. Okay, and I have to take issue with you on something. I personally, I don't discount the views of people who live outside a ward, and I agree with you about the survey. I don't think it's sufficiently robust to be an influencing factor. But in terms of people presenting a view, as you know, Kapiti is full of experts from top to bottom, and so I personally welcome input, but I take it you were referring to those as numbers rather than the view, or was
Yes, I mean, what I'm concerned about is that, as I explained earlier, there is good reason to believe that a number of people who don't have any detailed knowledge would take it that the council has a robust information base for what is proposed. In my own case, in regard to the Paikok, Raumati, Paraparamu boundary, I found, I kind of, if I could accept that the council really has done its homework, then my inclination would be to say, well, to the extent I have a view, it'll be to agree with what that evidence demonstrates. And I think a lot of people from Paparamu and Raumati, Paikok, who know nothing about the Te Horo border issue, will have taken that view in this case. So I'm proposing that sort of where somebody, on the other hand, has written a piece on the matter, then fine, they have focused on it and should be given an appropriate amount of weight. But where it's just yes in this survey, given the deficiencies of it, that should not be regarded with any great significance.
great? Thanks, Pat. Enjoyed Greece?
Thank you. You very much so. It's amazing. There's a piece in a museum of a tool set, including files and hammers of somebody who was working 1200 BC. It sort of puts you into perspective.
Councillor Pravanov.
Hi, Pat, and thank you very much for the time you've taken to write your submissions and to be up in the middle of the night to present your submission here verbally. I have a question. Well, I have probably several questions. My first question is that, so when you did your Official Information Act request, there was one written submission that state Te Horo should be in the Otaki ward. When you were going through that information, were there any that actually stated that Te Horo or parts of Te Horo should remain in Waikanae?
Well, the report of the officers was that there was only one, and I did do a search. I think there was one other mention of Te Horo, but it was rather vague, and that was it. So, I mean, to be frank, the council statement that I referred to earlier talks about feedback from the community, but it turns out that in the preliminary engagement, it wasn't that there were a whole lot of Te Horo residents who participated then and said, I'd like to have this opportunity to give you my strong views about the boundary. It was only one person, and they just had this one line. So the answer to your question is, I think there was one further mention of Te Horo, but it was more vague.
Okay.
Could I just very briefly say, Councillor, that I've been focused on this border issue. I do think there is an issue about the community board membership matter and whether the two councillors should be on it. I don't understand the technicalities, but I just want to register I have some sympathy with the proposition that both Waikanae councillors could be on the Waikanae Community Board, but I'm not properly informed about the detail.
Thank you for that. So I suppose in relation to that last comment, I think Dale Ofsosky said there was absolutely no reason why both Waikanae ward councillors could not be on that board when you have a situation in in Paraparaumu where there are 2 ward councillors. So there's absolutely no reason why that can't occur.
Yes, so very briefly on that topic, I stress I can't say I'm really speaking for the Waikanae Beach residents on this because we haven't really considered in depth, but it does seem to be a bit of a case. I know that the law says that there have to be more elected members, directly elected members, I believe, than councillors appointed. I can see a case for symmetry and for both. I think I'll just leave it at that.
Great. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank
for your
you.
thoughts on that.
Thank you for your comments and answers. Thank you.
Well, I don't believe we have any more questions for you, Pat. So thank you for your attendance today and for zooming in and for the information that you've presented us with. Certainly very useful.
Thank you very much. And again, thanks to the staff for how they got me this slot. Much appreciated. I'm not going to listen to the rest of it.
Yeah, fair enough to sleep well.
Tonight. I will later, but not tonight. So I'll sign off and thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Martin Weil. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you very much. I swapped my jacket before I came this morning.
Hang on a minute. We'll just get you
Sorry.
on the microphone. We do have Councillor Halliday and some others online, so
Thank
we
you.
have to use the microphones.
I
today.
swapped my jacket just before coming because I was cold and left my submission in my jacket. So
you're off the cuff today.
This is off the cuff today. So thank you very much for the time to speak on the matter of representation. I want to raise 2 points in particular. One is I don't regard this as a matter of Maori non-Maori. I don't regard it as a matter of a treaty issue. I regard it as a matter of parliamentary democracy. And as I understand, we've had a survey of the constituents of the area about the proposal for a Māori ward, as all councils around the country have done, and we had a resounding response to say no. But I understand that you as a council, as councillors, have gone ahead and ratified that and reaffirmed it recently. So the government has made a change in legislation to reinstate a referendum, which I understand we're going to have at the next local body election. And the Māori ward will remain in place until the following election, even if we have the same response from the constituents of the area. So democratically, we are going to have a voice to say this is what we want. So my concern is around parliamentary democracy, that if the will of the people says that this is what we want, then that's what this council will have to institute and inaugurate. The second one is around the matter of precedents. So the creating of a precedent of appointing a seat specifically to Māori representation also raises the question, well, what if any other group within society, whether it's racial, religious, or special interest group, wants their feet under the table as well? And a precedent will have been created that will give a, so to speak, a foot in the door. And my concern around that is speaking with people who have represented at national government level, who have voted for legislation that was presented in a way that looks so entirely benevolent. But over time, with changes, with the twisting and the rearranging, have reached outcomes that those originally voting on the legislation wouldn't have voted for it. And there are many examples of that happening in our history. So precedence is really important here. I just think it looks to me to be a confusion that we're presenting to constituents to say that there is a Māori ward seat which was the reallocation of an existing seat, which is given but not voted for, and yet the seat is occupied by a person who is voted for and not given. So to me, there's a slight confusion in people's ability to understand how that seat works. However, at the end of the day, I think the matter is presented to the constituents of the area, just as they are around the country, and the democratic right of all constituents is to vote accordingly.
Thank you very much, Martin. I've just got one question for you before I go on to the other questions. Do you think we should have a referendum as to whether to have Māori electorates as well?
Well, interestingly, in 1986, the Royal Commission on Electoral Reform, if I got the title correct, recommended the taking away of Māori electoral seats because if the country chose to have mixed member proportional representation, then Māori would have more opportunity to represent, and it has happened that way. In fact, it's happening extremely well that way, and I'm truly appreciative of that. It's wonderful that that change has come about.
But you don't think that should apply at a local level?
Well, the Electoral Commission recommended the scrapping of Māori electorate seats because MMP would give more access to Māori representation, which it has done.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Wilson?
Yep. Unfortunately, we don't have MMP in local government. Just to deal with the point of precedent, and because this has been, we've received quite a bit of feedback about that. The idea that some other sector group will then spring up and demand a seat. The reason there is a Māori ward is because there's a treaty, and it's the only, and it's still considered a founding document. In fact, we got one up on the wall there. Because of that, it is a special relationship because of the treaty. So the idea that somehow it's going to set a precedent, I don't think that.
So we're asking questions. We're not debating with the submitters.
No, that was just a point of clarification. But
just a reminder to everybody.
So the other point, and I don't want to be too gnarly about this, but the Local Government Commission gave us something. They gave us the Raumati Community Board, which wasn't asked for by council. So there's that. And then, but the last bit, I guess, is when you're saying legislation comes in ostensibly as benevolence, but it can turn into something else, which of course is malevolence. I'm just wondering, and I've asked this question, is what shape do you think the malevolence might take about having a Māori ward? I've asked people, what do they think bad will happen at this council if there is a Māori ward councillor? I understand why people have a guttural response, but what's the logical response about what might go wrong? What do you think would be bad about that?
Okay, I'll answer this in a roundabout way. This is not a conversation that I'm having with my Māori friends. This is not an issue. This is not a matter of contention. So why is it a matter of contention? And from what I see at national government level, where I see Māori activism really in many ways holding a country to ransom Yes, I would hold that as a concern at a local level as well. And we are talking about councils all around the country, even though this is specific to this council. So I think Maori activism plays a role, but does Maori activism represent all Maori? And my concern would be that you open a door to an activist capacity that was not necessarily considered by those who voted in it as a benevolent thing. Yeah.
We have Nigel's microphone back, please.
I've probably been accurately described as a Pākehā activist, and I'm sitting next to one as well. I don't think it's just Maori activism. I think Pākehā any kind of activism, for the most part, is a reasonably safe bet. I just would note that of 49 councils who have a Maori ward, this is going back to that last point, of the 49 councils who currently have a Maori ward, 45 of them have overwhelmingly reinstated that Maori ward.
Well, my question to you is,
So if it was going
did
badly,
the 45 councils represent the vote of the people, or did the 45 councils ratify it because they know better?
Probably because they think they know better. Just most of the decisions that we make here.
We're not debating.
No, I'm just saying that most of the decisions that councillors make, we don't have the referendum system. So we get together collectively, and our collective genius comes up with a vote on something, and we don't always go back to the community. And I guess that's the other point, is that the leaders of change, very often, it's not done by referendum. By referendum, you would never get change.
Is there a
generally.
question in that?
But no, not really. But anyway, but I respect.
But however, the referendum has been reinstated, as I understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
There will be time to make points when we make our decision. Today is about listening and asking questions. It's a submission day, not a debating day.
Thank you, Nigel.
I'm sure you're okay with that, Martin.
Certainly.
Councillor Coe, you got a question?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, do you believe that council has an obligation to find ways to involve Maori in our decision making?
I think council has an obligation to engage everybody, because
I haven't finished yet.
Okay.
But yeah. So that's the first part of the question.
Yes.
And then I'm presuming you're aware of our current arrangements. Are you aware of those? How we engage with Maori at the moment?
Yes, I am. Yes.
So we have three mana whenua representatives who are unelected around the table. So firstly,
are they mana whenua elected around the table with full voting rights?
No. They're not elected. They're representatives of mana whenua, appointed by mana whenua. They don't have voting rights at council, but they do have voting rights at committee level. So I'm just wondering, firstly, do you believe we have an obligation to involve Maori? And secondly, what is the best way to achieve that? And given that we have Maori in our community who are, some of whom are mana whenua, and some of whom, the majority of whom are not.
My experience of getting involved with local politics of late, Bede would support me in this, I think. I wouldn't just say Maori, I would say everybody on the coast here. I find so very few people know what's going on here, very few engaging. And in fact, I find a great gap between what happens at council and actually communicating that to the community. Mostly people have no idea what's going on. Whose fault is that? Well, it's a mixed fault, really, isn't it? If you're not interested, you won't find out. And if you on the other side of the coin, I guess you're busy enough to... Your task is not necessarily to do the engaging, although it's part of the collective task. So is that any different from Maori? I'm not sure that it is greatly different from Maori. how do we get everybody involved, more interested, more engaged in the matters of our community?
Yep, that's a very good question, and I agree.
And actually, somebody raised, may have been Bede who raised this at the community board meeting. We used to have a single platform to reach a community through a newspaper or newspaper and radio, but mostly through the newspaper. That's gone. You know, now you're dealing with 10 different platforms, and not everybody engages in all of them.
Right, I'll leave it at that.
Yes.
Mr. Larissy.
Yeah, good morning, Martin. I'm always deeply appreciative of your input. Really love the way you engage in the challenging questions you ask of me, certainly. I'm just interested in something that you sort of commented on there, and I just want to bring it out. You referred to parliamentary democracy. So I guess you'd sort of broadly say what we have is a representative democracy. So the people democratically elect people from the community to represent them in decision making. So my take on that is that to some degree the people who are elected to represent the people have the mandate to make decisions on behalf of the community. Do you accept that the decision this council made to establish a Māori ward, do you believe that it was a valid decision within the delegation, within the elected mandate of this council?
No, I don't.
Why?
Because I think you're creating a divide in doing so. So you're selecting a particular group, and I think it's based on the ideological assumption of tangata whenua. Tangata whenua was here first, therefore they should have a greater say. And in my lifetime, I've seen that whole turn of the tide to
it's changed a lot.
It has changed.
That's a philosophical objection.
And I'm not frightened of that change, but I think, like I say, they're creating a precedence through race and ancestry does create a massive issue, because what about everybody else? Where do other groups fit in?
Sure, Councillor Wilson's explained that, but that's a philosophical objection to the decision. But in terms of the mechanics of making that decision, under the rule of law, do not the representatives at this table have the right to make such a decision?
I actually think it's a bigger issue than this council making that decision. This is a national debate. This is, you mentioned about it being a treaty issue. You could argue that one both ways. But I think we should not put the treaty in the drawer and not talk about it any longer. I absolutely welcome that we debate. And we talk, and we work ways to discuss and function together. So amongst my Māori friends, of which I have many, and they are current and active relationships, a lot of these are givens. You know, we're not wrestling over these issues because we express our relationship and our love in other ways. We're not feeling a loss together. Yeah.
Okay, no, thanks. I'll leave it there, but yeah, thanks. Keep engaging.
This has been a really interesting discussion. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's been a bit of a debate too, which is not what it's meant to be, but still interesting. Yeah, so thank you for sharing your thoughts and coming in today. Much appreciated.
Very good.
Thanks, Martin. Richard Young.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Richard Young aho. I have some little handouts, as you normally expect from me. It was going to be a really simple one on maths, but I added a couple of things on relating to Māori wards, which might just continue that discussion we just had earlier. But let's start with my submission, and it's to do with the basic maths of boundary wards, and what I can't understand, and I haven't been able to find a suitable answer to. there are some changes proposed to the boundaries of the Paikakariki-Raumati ward. It doesn't get smaller, it gets larger. In nowhere does the boundary recede. However, on the published information, the number of electors reduces from 8,760 to 8,300. So my first question is, where have those 460 people gone? And more significantly, there's at least another 300 coming in the large area to the east of Paikakariki. The maths just seems a wee bit weird. So perhaps it's a question for councillors to ask their staff, are we confident with these numbers? So that's the nub of my submission. But I do have some extra feedback, but happy to deal with that first.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I think we need to take that away and have a look at it, unless there's any staff here who can answer that right now. And Dale is online too. Are you? Oh, I'll go to Stephen first, and then I'll come to you, Dale. Okay, Dale, do you want to jump in on this one? Thank you.
Yep,
Thanks for coming today.
Thank you. The current arrangements do not include a Māori ward. So the populations of those 4 wards in the current arrangements includes both the general and Māori electoral population. But in all of the options for the representation review, we're establishing a Māori ward. So the Māori electoral population has been moved out of those 4 respective wards and into the Māori electoral, into the Māori ward.
So they've gone into the Māori ward. That's where they've gone?
Yeah, so the populations of those 4 wards does decrease because it's losing the Māori population.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, but I think we got the gist.
I think we're saying it's because of the removal of people who are registered on the Māori ward from that constituency. Look, I've asked that question a few times. That's the first time it's been answered, so I'm really grateful for that answer. It means that if I stand again, I need fewer votes, but that's all good. Secondly, extra feedback. Look, congratulations on refusing government's request to disestablish the Māori wards. 1867, I think, was when Parliament voted to establish Māori electorates. That was without a referendum, so I think you've got great precedents there going back over 150 years, so well done for that. And my follow-up, as you probably expect from me, is will councillors now follow the line of other councils and ask staff for a report on the implications of not undertaking a binding referendum to abolish a Māori ward?
We actually haven't discussed that. From my personal point of view, I don't think our advice would be different to other councils, and other councils have commissioned that work. So I'd be keen to see the results that come from their work rather than spending ratepayer money on our own legal investigations.
It may be something LGNZ may be able to assist with, obviously.
Yeah, so there's a couple of councils, at least 2 other councils, who've commissioned that work. So what comes back of that would be applicable here as well. And then once we see what that is, then we can have a look at things here potentially. But it's not something we've discussed at all around the table. B, do you have a question?
Yes, just one question. Thanks, Richard. So just notice in your submission you talk about it not being logical to have separate community boards for Paikakariki and Raumati. I just wonder if you've got a gauge from in the community itself as to how they feel about that?
I'm not here to represent the community, you are. However, I think it's a valid question. We have different wards with different numbers of people, and one of the smallest wards has got 2 community boards. Now, I know that means that the funding gets split, but I wonder, I'm sure there's a great historical precedent for Paikakariki and Raumati having different community boards. Hey, I'm ambivalent about it. I just did wonder why we have a different style, different ways of representing our communities within the wards, because I'm also conscious that in the Raumati community board area does not fully align with the Raumati Paikakariki ward. So some people that are in the Raumati Paikakariki electorate, ward or electorate, are not in the Raumati community board. And that's a bit odd, because it's a pretty arbitrary line within there. So perhaps there's scope for doing that. But that's something that is my personal view, and I'm happy to share that.
Cool. No, thank you. Just curious. Cheers.
It's something that's been raised from time to time over the years. When I was on the community board, first on the community board 17 years ago, there was a discussion in this room about that, or it must have been in the old council chamber actually. Councillor Wilson?
The ghost is still lurking up there somewhere. Richard, two things. One is my X-ray vision just refuses to allow me to read those numbers at the top. So
they're pretty small on the website as well.
Yeah. Where are they from? What was?
This is from the KCDC website.
Oh right, okay. And do you know what year those numbers are? Is it how?
Well, the one on the left says perhaps somebody from staff would like to address it. It's there, Matt.
We have to do one of those things, Anyway.
Would you like to answer that, Steffi?
Yeah, I can.
Yep.
Those two infographics have been designed for this representation review.
Ah, right.
So
okay.
one shows the current structure, and the other one shows the proposed structure that we consulted on.
Okay, that's cool. And something I'm a bit keen on, but I don't know if you have a view about having two councillors for a combined Paikokariki-Raumati ward. Do you have a view about that?
Well, I'll refer you back to the math, as they say. That would be one councillor for 4,200 people, which is an overrepresentation of about 100%. So I'm not sure that, while it'd be great to have a councillor for Raumati and a different councillor for Paikokariki, perhaps the other councillors who would lose one of the extra seats might want to comment on that. Yeah. I think it's all about fairness. I'm quite surprised you didn't know what those drawings were. Actually, that's what this thing's all about.
No, I know what the drawings are. Is like a regional council, for instance, the Wairarapa, that has the smallest population by far, at one stage had two councillors because of the geographical size. It's about 2/3 of the entire region. So it wasn't just about population. It's about communities of interest. It's about the size of the electorate and those sorts of things as well. But anyway, no, that's cool. Yep.
Sophie, Councillor Hanford.
Kia ora, Richard. Thank you for coming along and also for submitting. Just a question in relation to your comment around us councillors asking staff for a report on the implications of not holding or undertaking a binding referendum at the next election. Thank you for that comment and for adding that in here. I'm just wondering if you could expand a little bit on why you think that's important for us to understand, and why you put forward that suggestion.
If you notice, it isn't a suggestion, it's a question. It's a question of whether you will be making that, seeking that advice. There is precedent for it. As I say, I knew of one. It sounds like there's two councils out of the 45 who have refused to disestablish Maori boards. I don't want to get into differences between national and local government politics here. I don't think that's the forum for it. But I think there was clear rules about setting things up, and I think it is unhelpful and unhealthy that when you have a change in government, that stuff that's already been established and proven is reversed without good cause. Same goes for the ferries, by the way, but I don't think the council have anything to do with the ferries, do they?
Councillor Cooper.
Hi, morning, Richard. Thanks for coming in. Do you think the expense of that advice, which would come straight out of ratepayers' pockets, would be good value for money for our ratepayers?
Well, two things. I'd perhaps echo what your mayor said, that very prudently you look to see what other councils' advice were to save the ratepayers' money. And secondly, not having a referendum will be a hell of a lot cheaper than having one. So perhaps, it's not about money though. It's about fairness and representation and honouring our communities. It's not about money. And if you think it's about money, I think you've missed the point, Glenn.
Well, no, seeking advice is about money. It's about ratepayers' money. So I don't think I've missed the point at all, but thank you for your input.
Great. Thanks for coming in, Richard. another interesting discussion.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thanks so much. Steve LaHood, welcome. So save it till you get to the microphone so that Martin can hear you and others.
Hi, I'm Steve LaHood. I live in Paikakariki and I'm 73 years old. A second generation New Zealander, Lebanese origin, and we're all from somewhere else on this planet. And in my long career as a filmmaker and museum exhibition producer, I've worked with tangata whenua right across this country on subjects that are intrinsically Māori without ever really understanding te reo Māori or me ona tikanga. But what I do understand, though, is that New Zealand is Māori, that as a nation we don't have an identity without Māori. So I do hope, I support very much the Council's proposed structure of representation, and with some comments, the establishment of a Māori ward district-wide councillor. What I do hope is that Council is working out, and I'd quite like to know some of the background behind this, with the multiple hapu and iwi of this district, how a single Māori ward councillor might speak at council on behalf of them as a collective. It's not something I imagine that would happen overnight in Te Ao Māori. That doesn't happen overnight. It would require unfaltering support from people in terms of people and resources from the council to build the trust that's required for this initiative to be effective. So establishing a Māori ward over the whole district is a great thing, but there's a lot underneath that I'm hoping there's been a lot of conversation and discussion and planning and systems put in place before this ever eventuates. Look, it's a challenge, and it's a thrilling initiative to have iwi and hapu interests represented at council. And from my perspective, it seems like that's really urgent because there are huge changes happening in the district, you know, accelerated housing developments, hopefully affordable by these very people who we're hoping to represent here, significant roading connections to Levin and Palmerston North that will change this district completely, I think. We're talking about a major new town centre right over there, repurposing revocated lands from the Transmission Gully project and rewilding our wetlands and future-proofing ourselves against climate change. So these are all enormous undertakings, totally supportive of all of this. But how do we weave our new Māori ward into that? And what is the impact of our Māori ward and our multiple hapu and iwi on our community boards, on the work of council? How do you see this ward playing out at this table is the question I have. Then, according to your request for participation in this meeting, you state, during the 2025 elections, we're required to hold a poll to determine if the Māori ward remains in place for the 2028 and 2031 elections. And look, that's barely enough time to construct a plan for the existing Māori ward that we're talking about. It's pretty much an insult to our community of ratepayers to be forced to hold such a poll so quickly after deciding to establish a Māori ward. To say nothing of what a poll like that might cost us as ratepayers, and o kune whakaro, the divisive wairua of such a poll in this community when we are trying to be a sunny, future-focused group. Therefore, it's my personal submission to this council that it rejects central government's demand for a poll to determine if the Māori ward remains in place for the 2028 and 2031 elections. A simple no thanks will do, or perhaps pōkokohua might be the appropriate word. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Any questions? Mr. Larissy.
Thank you. I love your big picture view of things. It's always so motivating and inspiring. So thank you. Just a question. We've had a view as a person from Paekakariki. We've had a view that the Raumati and Paekakariki boards should be combined to a single community board. So as a citizen of Paekakariki, how would you feel about that?
Oh, I think that's a great idea. Bring more voices into the community. I find that community boards.
Sorry, just the two existing boards combined into a single one.
I think it's a good idea. I feel about community boards. I've been active, sort of, in the community board space. I feel about them that they are undernourished in a sense, that they rely on the spirited volunteers who represent us in those community boards. The council somehow needs to up its game in terms of listening to the community boards, make it more formal, make it more an event somehow, so that those communities see that they are having, through their community boards, a stronger effect on council somehow. I don't know how that works yet. Maybe it's about resourcing them better. I don't know. So perhaps putting Raumati, which is an energetic community board, congratulations, a really good board, and Paekakariki, which again is a long-lasting and very good board, putting them together gives great strength to that southern district, southern part of our district.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Wilson.
Can you not just say no? What are the rules to the government?
We're waiting to see what the advice is to some other councils in that regard. But yeah, it's a good question. What would happen?
Yeah, my question relates to that, Steve. It would require some serious Pākehā activism at this table to reject that. Personally, I favour telling the government exactly how we feel about a referendum. The point that you made is a really, really interesting point about the Maori Ward Councillor and how they actually represent mana whenua in the broadest sense. And I hopefully during further discussions we'll get to that. There have been dangers before where a person gets elected to a role and is then accused by their own group of people that they're not representing everybody, which is an incredibly hard thing to do anyway. So I just wondered about what the expectations are. Do you have any particular expectations that the person who is elected is going to bring a broad philosophical view, or would they be required to bring the view to the table of all of those various groups? Because that would be incredibly difficult, I imagine.
It's a very difficult issue when it comes to mana whenua. For instance, I've only been in this community for 6 years, but I already recognise at least 5 manas whenua and have had dealings with those people. So there's Raukawa to the north, there's Te Atiawa through the middle, there's Ngāti Toa, its interests in the south, and Ngāti Haumia and Puketapu Hapu, and these people are they're intrinsically involved in our district. They have mana whenua over large parts of our district, and there are many I don't even know yet, right? They have financial interests, they have contracts and deals with you, the council, and with private contractors in the district. So how collectively, given the history of this region, given the raru of the region that exists even today, how all of that gets pulled together in a way that is tika in Te Ao Māori, that is quite an interesting challenge. I just don't know how you do that, given that a Māori ward is a Pākehā interpretation of kotahitanga, not a Māori one. I suspect that you will have some difficulty. I suspect that this is a challenge to find a person who is accepted by the collective manas whenua of our district, and who will have the confidence of all of the various interested groups. And I wonder how yours, I mean, are we at ground zero? Are we just beginning this now? Or have you had conversations with the various hapu anyway?
Yeah, I would just finally just feed back into the process that going forward on this, it is a very complex area. I'm hoping that people like yourself and Martin and others who have a serious interest in this, interested enough to come along to this representation review, and continue that debate. And because already Martin raised a bunch of questions, you've raised a bunch of questions, things that we may or may not have considered previously, but are going to be germane to what the outcome's going to be. So thank you.
Good.
For doing that.
Okay, put me on your list. Cheers.
Sorry, we've got Martin Halliday online.
Hello,
He's got
Martin.
a question. You're not quite off the hook yet.
Thank you. Just checking you can hear me okay?
Yeah, can.
All good, Martin.
Look, thank you very much for coming along, Steve. It's great to have a balance, get some counterbalance with regards to some of the conversations that are going on. You posed a question with regards to how this will potentially work. First thing and please indulge me, Madam Mayor, this is more of a answer to that. One of the things to take into consideration from the iwi perspective is that there's already a very strong relationship, an operational relationship with our mana whenua and our iwi in our district. And one thing that will certainly not be impacted by the Māori Ward decision as such. We're legislated to have that relationship with our local mana whenua, and I'm quite proud of the fact that we have a very strong relationship in that space, which has only been built on in this triennium. But I don't know if you're aware, one of the oaths that we take as elected members is the decisions that we make. We need to make them for the wider district in our deliberations. And I think that's quite an important consideration with regards to the Māori Ward conversation, because there seems to be a bit of rhetoric around the malevolence and the creeping in, so to speak, of the situation, which I think is not a very helpful conversation at all. I do believe we're at ground zero, and I don't know how that ward position is going to work. But what I do know is that it'll be a supported role, and it's going to be very interesting to see how it evolves. But for me, a big part of this conversation is also around the mātawaka, or the larger tangata whenua question, with regards to representation. But what does that look like? And it's not just inward facing into council, it's outward facing into the community as well, and how that person could potentially be a translator of the
Nigel, can I remind you that you're asking questions today, not me? Sorry, Martin, because he's doing this.
I've listened to quite a few statements.
Sorry, it was Nigel who did it last time. So
actually, it's come from quite a few different people, and I'll wind it up. No, there's no question there. Thank you very much for coming in, and I look forward to seeing the type. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see who puts their hand up for this role, because it's going to be a very, very challenging position. But I'm sure people like ourselves will be there supporting them as we move forward, Steve.
Don't get me wrong, Martin. Great to hear your thoughts. We're just trying to keep things moving along. Thanks so much, Steve.
Yeah, I'm off the hook. Right?
Really appreciate it. Chris Mitchell? It says tabled document. Where's our document? It's coming round. Thanks, Chris. When you're ready, look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Good morning. I did send through some speaking notes if you have those. So briefly, there's 2 points to the submission. The first is I would ask you to decide that you should just have a ward system for the election of all councillors. Secondly, and perhaps more of a challenge, I'm suggesting that you should have more councillors. Just before I get into the reasons for that, a little bit of background that you may be aware of or not. When KCDC was first established 35 years ago, it had 14 councillors, all elected on a ward basis, and there were 5 wards. Population about half what it is now. So a little bit of arithmetic there tells you that the burden on ward councillors is pretty substantial now. For the existing ward councillors, there's 1 councillor to just over 8,000 people, whereas you started with 1 councillor to just over 2,000. And I'm not sure that the council's ever really turned its mind to the effects of that burden. A little bit more recent background, in 2004, the council decided to have an entirely at-large system, so all councillors elected district-wide. Local Government Commission said no and imposed a 5-5 split, which lasted until the election before last, when that became a 7-3 split, driven largely by the arithmetic for Waikanae, which was then looking at a nearly 30% underrepresentation. And the current proposal is an 8-2 split, leaving 1 district-wide to have the Māori ward. So, turning to the submission, I've put 2, I think, key factors here. Although there are actually 3. One's occurred to me, so I'll come to that. But the first one is to actually ask why you're here. And that purpose is actually given to the council by the Local Government Act. And so I've put it there. You've all seen it before, but it should be a reference point. And the reason I'm saying it is that I can never see it in the papers that come up for representation review. I can't see the council being asked to look at what the best way of enabling democratic local decision making, etc. is. So I've given you the arithmetic, and I've said here, while the governance group has been reduced by around 1/3, the population has nearly doubled, and the organisation itself is, of course, much bigger and more complex. So in recent history, there's a lack, in my view, of any sort of analysis about why we have this unusual hybrid split of ward and at large. And it is unusual. There's probably only 2 or 3 councils in the country that do it. So here's a bit of a challenge. I just wonder to some degree whether it's a conversation that you as councillors are comfortable having, because it's my suggestion that you turn to an entirely ward system means that some of your existing colleagues, their positions are terminated. We won't have a district-wide role anymore. So the issue is then whether you're leaving aside personal interests. 10 ward councillors is a better form of representation than 8 ward councillors and 2 elected district-wide. And if an all-ward councillor model is better, then is 12 even better. And below I've given a few statistics because people say, wow, that would put Kapiti way out of step. But you'll see from the list below that that isn't so. There are smaller councils within driving distance of here who have more members servicing a smaller population, and almost all of them entirely on a ward system. So there's nothing really radical or unusual about what I'm suggesting. The third thing that I thought I would chuck in just to finish with is, in terms of the decision to create the Māori ward, although it's not stuck with a plus or minus 10% rule that other ward positions have got, it is nevertheless, I think, a consideration. And under the current proposal, what you will have is a variation for the Māori ward of just over 30%. But if you increase that to an all ward councillor system, the variation becomes about 13%, which is well within the bounds of what's acceptable. And these variations are important because they go to the equality of representation. If you have 12 ward councillors, which is what I'm proposing, then it's absolutely neutral. So the Māori ward becomes 1, which is the ideal. There's no variation. So just something to bear in mind there. There are a number of factors. So what I've said to finish with is, even with 12 ward councillors, the actual governance, the actual size of the governance group would remain significantly smaller and far more stretched than it was in 1989, given the population growth and the extra responsibilities imposed on the council since then. So on the plus side, in my view, it would bring more community voices to the table, and more means more diversity usually, better representation of those communities, and ultimately, I think, and this is the major thing, going back to that statutory purpose, a better council. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you for your thoughts. I've got a few questions. First, I've got Liz Coe, Councillor Coe.
Speaking as a district-wide councillor that would lose their job under your proposal, I have no problem with that, because I'm only here because people want me to be here, and if they don't want me here, then so be it. I'll go back to my retirement. But look, I just wonder whether you would see there is any danger of parochialism being an outcome of a system which was based entirely on wards.
Yeah, I think there's always been a good argument that a district-wide system maybe gets rid of parochialism. I think way back in 2004, you know, this sort of, I've used the neoliberal tag, but there's an element of truth to it, because in that sort of era, a lot of people were saying that there isn't any public service that can't be improved by having a more business-like approach, and getting rid of the local enthusiasts and the amateurs who step forward for these jobs, and having some serious people. I just don't think that's ever worked. And more importantly, if that's a driving thing for the council, then there should be some evidence for it. You know, is there any evidence that the council is a better decision-making organisation with district-wide roles? I don't know. I mean, but it, again, doesn't seem to me that that's something that's been overtly considered in the representation review. And once you get down to 2 positions, it does seem a little bit tokenistic, to be honest.
Councillor Hanford?
Yeah, kia ora, Chris, and thank you for
Good morning.
For the thought that you've put into this. And yeah, definitely you have a lot of historical knowledge to back this up, and appreciate you bringing that to the table. I completely hear and support the sort of the point I think that we're trying to get to around ensuring a diversity of representation and, you know, a solid group of people around the table to best represent our community. What's your thoughts on whether adding more people as councillors around the table, in terms of attracting the right people, what is quite often touted is that it's hard enough already to support yourself as an elected member financially if this is your only mahi, your only job. So if we had more people around the table, the money or the pool that we have through the Remuneration Authority remains the same, but then is split among more people. So do you think that that would be a challenge in attracting both the right people and also just attracting people generally to stand for council? To
be honest, I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, I appreciate that for some people this is a full-time job, and it's very hard to have another line of employment, and so the level of remuneration is critical, and if that's a significant factor, I don't know. I mean, if you increase the number of councillors by 20%, does that mean that you reduce the remuneration for everybody by 20%? I don't actually know. It is a factor, I think, but perhaps not the only one.
Councillor Provanoff.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chris, for coming along and some quite thought-provoking comments you've made. So I've got a question. I'm not sure whether this is actually more for staff or not. So based on, I suppose, the other councils, their population, the number of ward councillors, we hear a lot about this plus or minus 10%. And I'm not actually sure how that works in relation to them, particularly when they've got 12 ward councillors and they have a population of only 38,000. For that plus or minus 10%.
Do you have any comment to make about that,
Mr. Look, I think every council's different, and the arithmetic, it's sometimes a bit challenging. If you went to 12 councillors here, for example, on a ward basis, of course you would have to change the boundaries. At the moment, you've got 8 ward councillors. We're proposing to have 8 ward councillors. You actually have 7. So I don't know. I mean, there are people who work out, they've got programs to do this based on all the different mesh blocks. And what always happens in every representation review is that the boundaries, for example, between Waikanai and Otaki wards get changed, and et cetera, et cetera. And that would continue. And it'll always happen because there's no perfect balance. So you'll always have unders and overs. And I don't know how it works in, say, Horowhenua or Whanganui.
Thank you. Through the chair, is Steffi able to make any comment about that?
No, she doesn't have that information.
Okay, thank you. So I have another question, and it's sort of similar to the lines that Councillor Canford said. So at present, I suppose we, as councillors, we have a set remuneration pool, and I think it's fair to say that based on that remuneration, there are a lot of people who potentially would be interested in staying to be a councillor, but because it's actually doesn't remunerate at a full-time position, they don't do that. And so what is occurring is that there's a lot of people who would actually provide really good skills around the table, but they aren't putting their hands up because of that remuneration. Do you think that would be exacerbated if the number of councillors was increased? Or I suppose your view also on the full, I suppose a whole group of people who work full-time and wouldn't want to stand because of the remuneration situation.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think, Councillor Hanford asked me that, and I can't think of anything more to say. Look, it could be a factor for some people. I think it would be a terrible shame if the voting on the sort of thing I'm suggesting is swayed largely by self-interest and remuneration. I mean, to be blunt, I don't think that should be a key criterion in the way you approach it. But nevertheless, I do accept that the money may be a driving factor for some candidates. I don't know.
It's a complex issue, the
It is.
remuneration of councillors across the country, based on population and how
I don't
that
think you do
attracts
it for the
people
money.
or doesn't attract people or increases diversity or doesn't. So we're not going to answer all those questions
No.
today, clearly, but you gave it a good stab. So I'll move on to Councillor Wilson.
Thanks for that, Chris. It's a fascinating view, and it hasn't really been traversed in this time round. But the idea of having no district-wide councillors and just having wards only. One of the issues that is that it's a couple of issues. One is it starts to get personalised for the people who are currently district-wide, and so it's not I'm assuming it's not personal about those district-wide people, and hopefully they wouldn't take it personally. But to the question of parochialism that was raised, I think a real-world example was with the Greater Wellington Regional Council, and I was told, oh, you'll have to be cautious of that because there's 5 Wellington City Councils and just one. In 9 years, I never saw a single instance of parochialism. People got round the table and made what they thought were the best decisions. So, and you will remember back in the day when there was all ward councillors here.
Is there a question here, Councillor Wilson? It is actually Nigel this time.
Yeah, sort of. There is a question. The question would be, when the Local Government Commission are for the most part shrinking councils, do you think expansion is likely to have any real legs with them?
Well, I think you have to remember that the shrinking was not the Local Government Commission. The Commission endorsed it. The shrinking of the Kapiti Coast District Council was entirely the Council's own idea. And similarly, it's been the Council's own idea to keep the number at 10. I accept that a number of councillors have around the country have shrunk. I mean, Wellington, I think when I worked closely with Wellington, had 21 councillors and they've gone to 15. But none of that's been driven by the Commission. And I think if you went to 12 and there was some rational basis for it, the Commission would say, okay, if that's what you want, that's okay.
Okay, and just finally, Cynthia, you've done all the heavy lifting on this, just a bit more for you. So in terms of how that divide might happen, so just quickly, 2 Otaki, 3 Waikanae, 3 Paraparumu, 2 Raumati, Paikokariki and 1 Maori ward, there's 12, but that's just random.
Yeah.
So have you given any thought to how that might, because if we went to the Local Government Commission and said, look, we actually think an all-ward system is an option here, they would obviously end up setting the boundaries, but presumably they would want some direction from us about that. So have you given any thought to the actual boundaries and numbers?
Yes, I have. And I started doing it, and the model would look something like you've just said. I find it quite hard to... let me give you this in 2 bites. I think as long as you're not much more than 15% over or under in a ward, that's usually okay, as long as there's some clear community of interest. I think when you get over the 20%, it's sort of screaming out for a different answer. In terms of my own analysis, yeah, look, I mean, the thing with the Māori ward is I'm not sure which general wards that populations come out of. Maybe it's evenly split across the 4 existing wards. I don't know. But you know, if it, and that would certainly affect the calculation for the the remaining general wards. So, yeah, I think you could make any number work, but there will, you'll never get it exact within the 10%.
With great input, really appreciate it. Yeah.
Great. Nothing to ask, Martin? No, just checking in.
Yeah, might do actually. Hang on. You hear me okay there?
Yep, absolutely.
Look, great seeing you, Chris, and thank you for putting forward something that's a little bit outside the square for this round. Interestingly enough, this actually was quite a robust discussion in the last representational review, whether we look to going to having more individual wards. But my question is, you've talked about the numbers in regards to the wards as they currently stand, but do you think there's perhaps more of a conversation around having smaller wards and more of them as such? So say for argument's sake, I think one of the considerations was splitting Paraparumu in half last time, potentially adding in a ward for Paikokariki, maybe even one potentially for Te Horo. As such, so would you be looking at maybe more wards to give that wider representation, or the current ward structure just with higher numbers in them?
I think it would probably work best with the current ward structure. It does become very complicated once you start fragmenting the existing wards. I mean, Paikokariki used to have its own ward. It was set up. But the population, you see, Paikokariki just hasn't grown. Whereas, that's not a criticism. Paikokariki's got the same population it had 100 years ago. But, you know, Waikanai has, 500% growth. So you would have to constantly fine-tune in future representation reviews, I think, if you did that. I would be inclined to stick with the current wards.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. That actually was what ended up being the situation. So it just got found the too hard basket trying to figure out how you'd split it up between 10 people as such. But no, I appreciate your input and appreciate the submission you put in. Thank you.
Slight correction there is we've got a bent for history in this submission. In the 50s, Paikakariki grew. There was the state houses were built at the northern end of the village.
My apologies.
But it just went from very tiny to tiny. So it didn't make a significant difference in terms of plus or minus 10% rules and things like that. So, thank you so much for this. There's so much information here and great to have that historic perspective and that comparison with other councils too. It's something that I think might, if it doesn't have an impact on this representation review, certainly some input which will be useful in the first stages of the next representation review, and we do tend to remember things like that around here, so thanks so much for your input, really fantastic.
You're welcome.
Stephen Blythe, one more before morning tea. We're only running a little bit behind, so if we could all keep to questions.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko tēnei tāku mihi ki ngā tangata whenua o te Rohi nei. Hi, I'm Stephen Blythe. I'm a local resident of Raumere South. I've got 2 children at the Kapiti College, and I'm active in a range of community matters. I've come today to just to back up the submission that I made on the representation review. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging the council leadership and the Mayor's leadership in establishing the proposal for establishing a Māori ward. And largely my comments today are speaking to that. And also like to acknowledge Ngā Iwi Ahika for their role in our district providing leadership. My comments today, as I noted in my submission, I support the Māori ward. I think it's a really great thing for the district. And I just want to outline a couple of the reasons why it's important to me and my family. I feel under the democratic system we've effectively operated on the basis of a majority rule. This means that there's no guarantee that Māori, who make up close to 20% of the population, will have their collective interests represented. And establishing a Māori ward will go some way towards partially addressing this. I think our society, environment, the economy and our future is enriched by the experience, knowledge and values found in Te Ao Māori, and deliberation and decisions are improved when Māori are seated around the table. We all benefit when their voice is heard. So this new Māori ward will go some ways towards achieving this for our district. One other thing I really want to point out is my family arrived in Aotearoa in Canterbury in the second half of the 1800s. We've benefited enormously from migration and settlement in this country. The agreement that was struck in Waitangi in 1840 is the basis by which we've been able to prosper here and for a nation to form. The original agreement, Te Riti o Waitangi, needs to be upheld, including within local government. The establishment of a Māori ward goes some ways towards fulfilling this obligation that we all share as New Zealand citizens. There's much more that I could say about
how we could honour the treaty, but I think that's best left for another day. With regards to the boundary for the Māori wards, I don't really have any great expertise or much to offer on that, and I don't really think it's my place to say. However, I do see the logic in that being extended across the full district. Before I finish, I just did want to make one suggestion to councillors. One thing that you may like to consider, the requirement to run a referendum on the future of Māori wards is something I consider an overreach by central government into a matter that has already been decided locally. There is no need to revisit it in a referendum next year. So I've heard a few other councils that have been exploring what options there may be to find legal avenues to challenge the law. I know it's been passed by Parliament, but there are discussions ongoing, and I'd encourage councillors to talk with your fellow councillors in other areas to see what avenues there may exist to address that. That's basically all I wanted to say. Just come here in support of the work that you've done and the leadership that you've shown. I look forward to doing what I can in supporting the continued leadership in ensuring fair representation by Māori in Kapiti district. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for that wonderful submission.
Yeah.
I do have a question from Mr. Larison.
Right, thanks, Steve. Really good submission, and I'm just going to make an observation that out of 5 speakers so far this morning, you're the third from Raumati, so strong showing from our little town. Look, I know you're a lover of conversations on democracy, so I'm just going to ask you, there is a view in the community that the implementation of a Māori ward is potentially undemocratic, or certainly has issues in terms of its democratic status. Do you see an issue from that democratic perspective or in terms of the rule of law?
I think it's important to explore issues like this. Otherwise, the last thing we want to have is a lot of division and conflict around how we organise ourselves. And I think because of the legal founding of New Zealand based on Te Reti o Waitangi, that has set a precedent for how democratic structures are set up. And I think that and being consistent and applying that in a modern day context, that we brings with it certain obligations that mean that the majority rule and having a fair, just the pure volume, or the people being able to, it's just it's not about might versus the smaller group, proportion of the population. Yeah, I don't feel I've properly addressed that, but.
Sure, the might versus right issue and the protection of minorities.
Basically, yeah, because the larger number can dictate the terms by which a smaller group, which has a collective set of interests, are overridden. Yeah.
So would not some people say that that's democracy in action?
I think New Zealand's based, we've founded on a different basis in that we have a treaty, which ensures that Māori have their rights as enshrined in the articles of the treaty respected, and that democratic majority and rule shouldn't doesn't.
So a bulwark against the tyranny of the majority, if you like.
Yeah, to recognise the collective interests of Māori. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Stephen. I'll go back to something that the other Steve, a room full of Steves, said about that a referendum is an insult, and the divisive wairua was the term that he used. And I just wondered if you have a view that if there was going to be a referendum, how much of a disincentive would that be for a candidate to stand for a Māori ward, knowing that there could be a massive public insult coming at the same time that they're getting congratulated for having been elected. And then how does that fit, knowing that how you might feel? This is this divisive wairua that Steve was referring to, how that councillor might feel sitting there for 3 years and probably not feeling particularly legitimately there. Do you know what I mean? Have you given some...
I haven't actually considered that, but one of the things that I think in the lead up to the referendum, it would be a very healthy thing to have a lot of dialogue and discussion. And I think when we start scraping the surface and we start doing some work on these issues, people have more in common than they do in opposition. So I think really it's an opportunity in the months ahead, not just to leave it to some sort of campaign, and some of the issues like that can be raised, because we wouldn't want to be entering into a situation where it's sort of damaging to someone's personhood or their career or anything like that. So appreciate you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Great, thanks for coming in, Steve.
No, thank you for the
And your
time.
lovely submission. So we'll take a break now for 15 minutes, and then we'll come back with John Andrews after the break.